the only way to start your day.
To interpret a proverb. We go to a different African country every week. Dennis comes back with those proverbs, and he'll tell you where we are this week, and we'd love to get your interpretation.
Yeah, so today we are in Cameroon, a country with a population of 28 million people, speaks English and French. They are rich. They have oil, they have timber, they have cocoa. One would say that now that they have cocoa, perhaps we should be buying chocolates from Cameroon. It is a prayer. But the proverb that we get from amazing people of Cameroon is even the strongest tree bends when the wind is strong. Even the strongest tree bends when the winds are strong. How would you interpret that?
Well, that would interpret that however strong someone is, if, for example, pressure is applied at some stage, they're likely to bend and also, of course, follow the direction of the wind. Yeah, the direction where the force is moving to.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be my interpretation.
Yeah.
Where it's moving to.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's great to hear that. So January this year marked 1 year in office for you. Of course, we saw this after the 6-year term of the previous CEO came to an end by law. It's a 6-year term, and so you come in for this period. So over the last 1 year, we come from a time where there was a lot of public activity around what was happening in the fight against corruption. Interestingly enough, the reduction or expulsion of corruption is one of the issues on the 10-point agenda that brought two political parties together. And though that's not the thrust of our conversation for this morning, looking at corruption, it's a big deal in the country. And at the time where the public was very expressive about how they felt corruption ought to be fought, we saw a change in the CEO position, bringing you in. What's the last 1 year been like in terms of this fight?
Well, it's been very interesting, and I can assure you that seat is hot, hotter than the seat where I'm seated today. And following the historical, changes within that office, a lot of my predecessors went through various challenges. Some had their career, losing their career. You remember there are some who actually had to leave office before the end of their contract. So it is really not a seat where one can sit pretty and feel that, they have arrived. But that doesn't mean that I was not prepared for the job.
Okay.
If you have been following the history of that organization, I have been there for close to 20 years.
Yes.
I joined the commission in 2005. Of course, going through the ranks up to January 2025, when I was appointed as the CEO. So it's been quite challenging. But of course, having been an insider, I had an idea of what the challenges were. And I definitely had to come up with different strategies on how to fast track and deal with corruption as we see it.
Yeah. So we talk about you getting in to the office exactly. That would be 1 year after the country was greylisted, right? And with the country being greylisted, one would ask the question: 2 years later, now 2026, where are we in terms of the fight against corruption, and what did the country being greylisted mean?
Yeah, greylisted means that business in our country will be expensive. Business of people who want to do businesses outside Kenya will go through a lot of checks. Banks will also have problems in dealing with foreign banks. So basically it means that Kenya will not be in a position where we can transact international transactions as we ought to. And remember, this is a country where a lot of our citizens trade. We trade with many, many countries across the globe. And for us to be able to trade, we must be able to do certain things that is expected of us by the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force. This is an international organization that sets certain parameters on what countries are expected to do. And from the assessment that was done in 2024, there are certain areas that were identified, about 21 areas that were identified for our country to deal with. We've been able to exhaustively deal with about 10. We are remaining with 11, which we are addressing. And we are moving to the final stage in May 2026. This is where now this organization will be able to review and assess us again. And if we've not been able to complete those areas that were expected of us to address, then there are certain actions that may be taken by or recommended by these organizations, which will have adverse effect in the business, in the way we carry out business in our country.
Right. There's an Office of the Auditor General. I want to come into what happens within the country in terms of fighting corruption, not just fighting corruption, but also to be seen to fight corruption. Fortunately or unfortunately, the EACC is right at the, as you say, right at the center of it, because it is the commission that it is tasked with fighting this thing for the country, right? Let's look at the Auditor General. That in the last 6 months, that office has been extremely busy in terms of bringing out certain things that don't look quite right, don't sit quite right in terms of how money is spent and or managed and accounted for, or in some cases, unaccounted for. When we look at the meetings of the county public accounts committees at the Senate level, oftentimes what we hear the chair saying is that we will recommend to the EACC for action. We will recommend to the EACC for investigation. We will recommend to the EACC for action to be taken against these individuals who do these things. What would be the progress on some of those things? Because we understand the Auditor General comes up with her report that is given to these committees. It also goes to Parliament, and then there's a recommendation to the EACC, which then it seems to stop there. Are we not seeing anything happening on the basis of those recommendations?
Well, audit reports are basically opinions, and they are supposed to be investigated more if we are to take criminal action against the perpetrators of the alleged corruption. So the process is, once the auditor completes their report, they share the report with the Public Accounts Committee or the Public Investment Committee. Now, at that forum, we have seconded our officers, two officers, who sit through the deliberations of those committees and take out the reports and share with us. And we've been able to deal with very many reports from the Auditor General's report. And to be exact, for example, if I may give you the exact numbers, in the last, since devolution, we've been able to investigate 24 governors. And out of those 24 governors that we've been able to investigate, 17 are in court, whether they are civil or criminal cases. 7 files are with the Director of Public Prosecution, and 5 files are being concluded at the Commission for Investigation. So the process is a bit lengthy because we cannot charge people by the Auditor General's report. We've got to investigate, come up with evidence. As I told you, auditor's report at times may not actually translate to actual criminal prosecution. But
it's a starting point.
It's a starting point.
It gives you something to then be able to look at.
Of course, it gives us the documents to look at, the witnesses to record statements from, but not in every report shall we be able to charge people or take people to court.
Okay.
You know, when you talk about the counties as we speak right now, if you look at even how the Accounts Committee has been handling these matters, there is rampant corruption in the counties, and one would say all we did was just devolve corruption to go into the counties, right? And here then, with the Auditor General's report and the recommendation from the Senate, one then asks the question: with all these report, first of all, from EACC, where you sit, how bad is corruption in the counties, and what are you doing with regard to that? Because many are saying, with all these that we keep saying, EACC is seen as a reactionary body. Is that the case? How are we doing everything to ensure that we do not come after the fact, that we work together with all these agencies, that at some point we even have citizens themselves reporting to EACC on corruption that happens at the counties? How are we approaching that?
Okay, first let me say that one of the best things that happened when we got the new constitution is devolution. And for a very good reason, that devolution means taking services closer to the people. And as EACC, we've been able to establish regional offices in most of the counties. For example, we have 11 regional offices, and those regional offices take care of about between 5 and 3 counties. My view is this, that from the onset, the people who are actually supposed to set up the structures at the counties did not do a good job. As we sit here, there are actually some counties where the systems that are in existence are actually not useful for any purpose. And there's need to relook at the whole system. But for us, what we are supposed to do is to ensure that we implement the law as is, whether proactively or otherwise. Like in the counties, we have what we call the risk assessments in the counties, where we go to counties and look into their systems and review and come up with proposals. With proposals with the counties and tell them, if you do this, things will be better. But in totality, where we have a problem mainly is in the payroll system. The other one is, of course, fake certificates, ghost workers. These are serious problems. But if you have been following the conversation, there is a system that is being introduced for payroll management for all government employees. I think that will help in some way. The only problem we have is the counties actually do not want to be part of any system that is being introduced by the government, including the EGP system, which in our view will sort out a lot of problems when it comes to public procurement. So we are not only dealing with county issues after the event, but we also have proactive engagements like the risk assessments that we do at the counties. Yeah.
I want to come back to these Auditor General reports. You mentioned that there are opinions. Opinions are things that are conjured in somebody's mind. But the Auditor General works with numbers, and that numbers don't lie. That they say if 11 billion shillings is missing from SHA accounts, it's missing. It's not an opinion, that the numbers are there, that you have a file where there was 11 billion shillings here. We cannot see a corresponding action to the 11 billion shillings, but we can see a balance, and that 11 billion shillings is not there. It's the numbers, right? And so if they tell us, for example, that there are some irregularities in balances that they see, and the thing about an audit process is that once they've done the process, they bring it back to the institution, individual concerned, and they say, these are the queries that we find in this process, and they give them a period to explain. Because in an audit process, if you don't have an invoice that attached to a particular spend, they give you an opportunity to provide the invoice, they give you an opportunity to provide the receipt, or they give you an opportunity to give an explainer for this query that they find. So it's the numbers. It's not somebody's mind conjuring up an idea. It's the numbers that, interestingly enough, the concerned parties provide. They are the ones who provide these numbers. So you provide the numbers, and then I calculate them, and this is what it gives me. How can that be an opinion?
Well, what I said is, I didn't say basically the numbers don't matter. Numbers matter. But what I told you is, for our purpose, if we have to charge someone for a criminal action or criminal offense, we need to bring out the evidence that can stand the test of time in court. So some of the issues at times are administrative in nature. They can be dealt with administratively. I'm not talking about SHA specifically, but I'm talking about the reports that we interact with. Remember, we interact with these audit reports through and through. There are times when the issues being raised are mainly, administrative in nature, misconduct, where disciplinary action is recommended. But for sure, I wouldn't want to go into the details because it's the DCI that is actually investigating SHA issues. It is not the EACC at the moment. Until the time when we are able to venture into that particular area, I wouldn't want to comment but generally what I said is when we investigate audit reports, not in all the times do we come up with criminal charges against the people who are said to have, either misappropriated money or may have done certain things.
How is EACC's synergy, in terms of working together with other agencies? Because we look at the Auditor General and her reports, those reports have gone to the Senate, right? And after these committees as well give their reports, they come to you for investigations. EACC as well works with the police to arrest, right? EACC works with the Office of the ODPP to prosecute, and as well as EACC would also depend on the judiciary to make its judgment. But there is a feeling that EACC as an investigative body who has gathered all this information, has gathered all the data for prosecution, then forwarding it to the ODPP, there is always that delay because then it takes a lot of time. There's a feeling that it takes a lot of time before these matters actually end up in court. Question: should EACC be given prosecutorial powers to be able to dispense off with matters that they do understand well? If not, how is EACC working with other agencies to ensure that all these cases are actually end up in court, justice is dispensed within the shortest time possible?
Yeah, well, as is now, it's the DPP who has the powers to prosecute. But in many jurisdictions around the world and here in Africa, the anti-corruption body actually does prosecute their own cases, and that has its own advantages and it has its own disadvantages. Some of the advantages would be that it will take shorter time to process this case and to charge the people who are culpable. And the other thing would be, the other advantage of course would be that there would be ownership. Remember, if you investigate a case, there is that attachment to ensure that the case is concluded or is pushed to the final end. There are also other advantages, many of them, in many jurisdictions that have been successful in dealing with corruption, we have the anti-corruption body actually doing the actual prosecution. Mauritius is a good example. Just across here in Uganda, Tanzania has a shared responsibility with between the ODPP and the anti-corruption body that deals with corruption matters. So it depends. But of course, the other argument would be that if you give one institution a lot of powers, there is a possibility of abusing that power. And that is why our constitution is very clear that, an investigator does the investigation, he passes to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor does the charging. Everything has its pros and cons, but in our assessment, in our view, nothing stops, Parliament from making a decision to give the Anti-Corruption Commission powers to prosecute. There wouldn't be any harm.
Because one would then ask the question, if you have investigated a matter, because EACC, as opposed to the police who would walk into a police station and charge someone, then later go to investigate, EACC is completely different. You only go to court after investigation has happened and you have evidence to charge an individual. How do you deal with the fact that at times you forward these files to the ODPP ready to charge, but it's returned back to you by the ODPP? How do you deal with that? How do you convince the ODPP then that we feel this matter is strong?
Okay. First of all, let me say that at the Commission we have about 100 lawyers who are as qualified as the lawyers at the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. It's only that they have different responsibility. The lawyers here at the Commission have two responsibilities, two roles. There is a team that goes to court for civil recovery cases, and there is a team that helps the investigators in coming up with the evidence, in completing the file. We call them evidence analysts. So when the lawyers together with the investigators complete a file, in our view, these lawyers who are at the EACC are as qualified as the lawyers at the ODPP, and they add a lot of value to the file. By the time we forward the file to the DPP, of course, the DPP has the constitutional mandate to charge or not to charge. That is a responsibility given to one person. But what we have always advocated is dialogue. Instead of files coming back to the commission, taking another maybe 2 or 3 months to deal with that issues, there are better ways of dealing with these, files, which we are trying now to address, to come up with, where the two teams sit together, especially in big files, and address the issues, as opposed to the file going to the DPP, coming back, and then returning to the DPP, which takes a long time. But just to add to that, remember there is a bill in Parliament, the Anti-Corruption Amendment Bill 2025, which the main aim is actually to fast track the processing of files and give certain timelines as to when a file should be concluded, when a file can be heard in court, how long it can take. If someone appeals, for example, to the Court of Appeal, how long it takes, it's supposed to take at the Court of Appeal. So that bill is with the National Assembly in Parliament, and we believe, or rather we hope, that it will be enacted into law very soon.
Okay. I'd like to take a break, but before we go to that break, Bwana Abdi, if you were to look at the country, what would you say is the percentage, or what would you say is the cover of corruption, and how deep has it actually gone? And this is not this could be an opinion, but what would you say is your diagnosis when it concerns corruption in Kenya?
Yeah, corruption is actually a big issue in Kenya. In our surveys that we did in 2024, corruption was second threat to our country after unemployment. Unemployment, of course, came top, and then we have corruption coming second. That tells you that corruption is actually a huge problem in our country. But that doesn't mean that it is a problem for Kenya alone. It is a global issue. But we are concerned with our country because that is where we are. But it is not, a Kenyan issue. It is not an African problem. It is a global issue, and each country around the world is addressing this problem on its own. And in my view, we are addressing, the problem in various ways, which we can discuss as we progress on.
We're going to take a break at this point, and we're going to come back and look at the ways in which this issue is actually being addressed and how it's actually getting the solutions to these problems. More with the CEO of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, Abdi Mohamud. He's here with us this morning. It's 28 minutes to 8 o'clock. We continue after this. Don't go away.
This is the Situation Room. This is the Situation Room. The only way per day
of society, that it's so entrenched and embedded in practice that it's almost as though it cannot be removed. So one of the things that we ask the questions about is then what is being done about it at the very doorstep of the commission that was established to deal with this thing. What are some of the things that are actually being done?
Yeah, thank you. So let me first of all say that corruption, being a problem, needs everybody's contribution. Everybody has a role to address this problem because it's a societal problem. Now, having said that, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission is the lead agency that is mandated to fight corruption. And we have various strategies that we deal with corruption. Of course, the first one is the law enforcement, which you've been discussing in the morning. We have the prevention, we have the public education, and of late, what we've realized is there are certain organizations and bodies that are very critical in supporting the fight against corruption. One of them is actually the professional bodies. The professional bodies in our country have a responsibility, and also the regulatory bodies also have a responsibility to address and fight corruption within their sphere. For example, in last week, we signed an MOU with the Institute of Human Resource Management, where we've been talking about issues to do with fake certificates, how we can partner with them to address the problem of fake certificates, because HR is the entry point to every organization. When recruitment is taking place, when promotions and interviews are taking place in an organization, the department that deals with these issues are the HR, personnel. And we are now in a position where we can train them and partner with them to deal with the issue of fake certificates, which is a huge problem in our country. The other organization that we are also just about to sign an MOU with is the Institute of Certified Secretaries. Mm-hmm. That also is another avenue which we think will support the fight against corruption. We will move on to other bodies like the LSK and many other professional bodies, so that those institutions can deal with corruption within their membership. Mm. Remember, if a member misbehaves or rather does something which is not criminal, it is those organizations that are to deal with that. The other area where we've also identified is the curriculum development. And we've also partnered with the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, so that from the beginning we are able to come up with a curriculum that will address corruption at a very early stage in the life of our children. Mm. And that is also another avenue that we've also addressing corruption. But let me sum it up this way. I started off by saying that every individual in this country has a role in the fight against corruption. Why am I saying that? In the 2024 general election, we flagged out individuals that are, some of them we are investigating, others we had already charged in court, and we advised the IEBC that, of course, clears these candidates, that in our view and from the records in our commission, these people have certain ethical challenges that they need to look into. And we also published those names in the social media and in many other media outlets. The result was that the same people whom we had advised the public against were elected back into office. Now, that tells you that the public also have a responsibility and a role to ensure that they elect people who are of integrity. But everyone needs to play their role in this particular.
What stops the EACC from saying this person, because this is what we see happening in other jurisdictions, because it's almost as though we're flirting with the idea of getting rid of corruption, right? What stops the EACC from saying, we, as having a commission with the mandate to flag out corruption, we say that we can actually stop you from being in a position whereby you are electable? Because you leave up, if you put it on the buffet, I'm going to serve it on my plate. Well, we're saying, what stops the EACC from not serving it as an option? That because of 1, 2, 3, we preclude you from offering yourself up because of this, pending investigation or pending confirmation of this action. But you're still giving, the EACC is also giving it up as an option. Why?
But it is the law. That is the way the law is. We cannot stop people from vying. The only people who can stop people from vying are the IBC. And even them, there are certain constitutional limits that force them to actually clear these people.
Chapter 6 of the Constitution deals with leadership and integrity. And we're saying that there are individuals who could have a besmirched image, who are offering themselves up for public office. And then the institution that is given the responsibility to ensure that that doesn't happen is also saying, well, okay, the law doesn't allow me to do that, so let me let them run. Where is this hard stance that is clearly needed to deal with this corruption that we don't see playing out its role?
The problem here is, if the Constitution allows these people to run for election or even stay in office, even when they are charged, there is nothing any institution can do. It is the Constitution. what happens in other jurisdictions, for example, if one is convicted at the lower court for a crime, they are barred from running for offices until the appeal mechanism, or rather the appeal process is complete. But ours is the vice versa, whereby we're saying, even if one is convicted in the lower court, until that person exhausts their appeal processes up to the Supreme Court even, they will still stay in office and they can run for election.
Do you think the law is flawed in that respect?
That is our constitution.
Do you think it's flawed in that respect?
What the constitution, we basically have to conform to the constitution. It is us who give ourselves.
So Abdi,
come on.
because then when Abdi, one would look at, if that is what the law provides for, then one would say it is the law then that is allowing individuals who shouldn't be in office to be in office. And that is the constitution, as you say, and
Yes.
it has to be respected. But knowing that that is a defect in the constitution can be amended,
Of
right?
course.
It can be amended. So then question is, knowing that that is a problem, are there any conversations, you and other agencies, to push for the amendment of the constitution that will help the citizenry be able to vote in individuals who are clean? Because it does not make any sense that if anyone wants to run for office, right, they have to go to DCI for good conduct. They have to go to KRA to get a certificate there. They will come to EACC as well for clearance. And EACC would say this individual is not fit for office because of these reasons. And that is forwarded to IEBC. But IEBC, despite that single document that would come from EACC, would still proceed and clear this person, because remember, the law says until this person exhausts all the appeal mechanisms, they are still fit to run the office. So that means the law has to be amended. Are we having these discussions with the legislators? Because you forwarded your members to the committees, right? That means you are in constant communication with the National Assembly. Are we having these conversations to change the law so that Kenyans can have individuals who are suitable to be in office?
Yeah, this conversation we started long time back. The 10-point agenda that your colleague talked about, during that particular forum in the Bomas of Kenya, it is one of the presentations that we did to the committee. We told them, in order to address this problem, what needs to happen is to see, because they were dealing with proposals to amend the constitution, that you need to address these particular articles of our constitution. One for the central, for the national government, state officers, elected state officers, and the other one for the county assembly, members. We told them to include that in the discussion for the amendment of the constitution, but that wasn't taken by the committee. It was dropped, and we will keep on, any opportunity we get, we actually present that, and because it is a big issue whereby now you're having someone who's been convicted who is still in office because simply he's an elected officer. If he were an appointed officer like me, the moment I'm charged in court, I leave office. I'm suspended. I leave office. But for elected officers, for elected state officers, the law is slightly different for them.
I hear you, and that seems like it flies in the face of anything really, because we're saying that for elected officers, what essentially we're doing is that we're massaging them and any kind of wrongdoing that they could essentially then be involved in. And we see a very different thing when it comes to the common citizen in this country, that it seems as though the arm of the law is hard and fast when it comes to dealing with these other things. But for some reason, we hold those who've been elected, again, by the people in some higher regard. And it goes back to my question. Does the law make it very difficult then for the commission to do its work?
In that area, yes. We would have wished, for example, the governors that we charged, for them to leave office immediately. But that is the law. The way it is, we cannot do anything about it. But the good thing about our courts is whenever we have a problem of that nature, we present, our cases in court, and in a decision that was done I think a few years ago, by the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Division of the High Court. It was decided that for governors, for example, the ones we were investigating, because that is an executive office, for the time that the investigation was ongoing, it was decided that that particular office be treated as a crime scene.
This was Justice Lynn Gogi's decision.
Yeah, that was a brilliant decision, and it really helped in, allowing us to go into the office where the governor performs his responsibility. But let me also say this: as much as we are blaming the elected, state officers, I think as Kenyans, as ordinary people, we also carry a lot of blame in that area. Let me just give you a simple example why I'm saying this. When we are investigating high-profile individuals, especially governors, and we summon them to our offices, you will see these people coming up with a big crowd, following them, clapping for them, encouraging them, all the way up to the Integrity Center or the office where we are doing the investigations. Just to give you a historical issue, some time back, because these crowds are actually there for hire. They're available in all centers for hire, including Nairobi. So there is a lady who came to the Integrity Center, making a lot of noise when we were recording statements from a prominent politician. And one of the, journalists who were there covering the story asked the lady, because she was making a lot of, she was emotional.
Yes.
And he asked her, by the way, do you know who is being investigated? Or rather, why are you here? Then the lady said, we are from one of the, slum areas in this city. We were called, we were offered some money. She mentioned the amount, and that is why we are here. Then she was asked a further question. Who is this guy who is being investigated? Who is this guy you are following and supporting? And the lady had no idea who she was following. Basically, she was just offered some money just to come and support these people. Why are we having people who basically encourage people who steal from us? But another example I want to give you is the recent investigation we are doing in Trans Nzoia. It was in public domain, so I can comment about it. When our officers went to Kakamega, to Trans Nzoia, to Kitale, our officers were attacked in a compound where some of the investigators, who were young ladies, were molested. And some of them are traumatized up to now. They had to seek counseling because those goons, as we call them, were hired and brought into that compound to come and harass our officers. 5 of our vehicles were vandalized, completely damaged. Now, why do we have? And then just to maybe conclude that story, just 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, I saw people from the same Trans Nzoia that who were supporting the governor not actually to be investigated at that time, calling on EACC saying, look, we want you to come and investigate the governor because there are certain issues we are seeing here.
The same people?
The same people.
There could be different people, but, for example, we are just saying these are the same people from the same county, from the same place. Why is that happening? At times we have to ask the hard questions. As ordinary Kenyans, do we really want any institution to fight corruption, or are we just supporting the people who we want to be investigated?
Then one asks the question, if that is the position where you find that citizens are not playing their role in the fight against corruption, because we also ask the question, because even during these political meetings that we see happen, you find it's Kenyans, again, who are being paid to show up in these meetings and even to cause chaos in these meetings. So if there is a gap in terms of the fight against corruption where citizens want you to fight corruption, but when you are investigating and in the fight against corruption, they are the very same people who are blocking you from engaging, from pretty much investigating and doing your job. One also asks the question, where is our psyche as a country when it comes to the fight against corruption? Because Today, there is a member of parliament who was actually who served time in jail because of corruption. But it is the very same Wananchi who voted this individual back to office. How are we taking this message to Wananchi to know that responsibility of fighting corruption is not only an EACC issue, is not police, is not the Auditor General, is not the oversight committees in Parliament, but it is a collective responsibility for each and every single person to be in the fight against corruption. Do Kenyans understand really what corruption, from where you sit, how corruption is denying them services that they ought to get?
Yeah, we have the public education and awareness programs that run, in many parts of this country that we conduct. But unfortunately, the way we are seeing now our country, the way things are, everybody is putting money ahead of every other thing. Why am I saying that? Is because when election is being conducted in this country, who gets elected? The people who get elected are the people who actually offer bribe. Our youth and most of our citizens are willing to take 200, 300, 500, 1,000 shillings, to sell their votes.
Why do you think that is? And I think we have to look at the deeper problem. Why do you think it is that Kenyans at this point, at whatever level, are going to take 200 shillings, are going to take 500 shillings, 1,000 shillings to probably eat on that day, to then sell their vote in the future? Is there a deeper problem here?
Well, it's something that can be discussed, or rather can be, ventilated in many areas. But in my view, it's a cultural problem. We are drifting towards a place where we are more concerned about today's survival, as opposed to the future well-being of our society.
Is that a bad thing, that Kenyans want to survive on this day, and that if a 200 shillings is given to them whereby they may not have it, and they take it to then do something in the future, would you say think about the future or eat today?
You see, we've asked many people, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And the answer, the answer that usually comes is, I don't have food for today. It's better I take that 100 or 200 to buy whatever for my family, whether it is unga or sugar or whatever, for me to survive today. Basically, it's like, I don't care what happens tomorrow. In any case, I just need to survive today. So it is a problem, but I really don't have answers to how we can solve that particular problem.
I want to come back to this issue because it seems to me as though the EACC, and it may be frustrating, is dealing with very many things that stops you from moving in the direction and with the potency that many a Kenyan would ask that you do, because it's wrapped up in the law. That's why you have things like referendums. That's why you have things like going towards Parliament and saying, can we have this conversation? Because if you want me to fight corruption, it's on a 10-point agenda, for crying out loud, that comes in on the 7th of March. But it seems as though there are some ropes that stops the commission then from being able to do its job. And then we can hide in the cover that, well, it's the law and there's nothing I can do about it. But the push for things is how we have seen things transgress, or rather progress in many different jurisdictions, that laws can be changed, laws can be amended, there can be a push for certain things to be done. But maybe we don't see that push. So do you think then that the commission actually is powerful enough to do the things that it ought to do? And if not, can we see a push whereby you say, come on guys, this law precludes us from doing our job. Can we think about having it amended?
Yeah, I think that is a good way of looking at this issue. Just to add that it is not only the EACC that is actually supposed to deal with corruption, or rather fight corruption. This is a chain. It starts with investigation, it goes to prosecution, and finally it ends up in court.
Yes.
All these institutions have responsibilities. If, for example, every institution along the chain does its job as expected and as per the mandate, I think we will have seen, we'll see a bit of, fear. Because what a lot of people tell us is this. Well, it takes, for example, 3 years, 4 years to conclude an investigation from the start up to the time when it ends up in court. For example, I'm talking about the big cases. Now, within that period, a lot of things can happen. What we are urging and what we've always advocated for is for each institution to do its job. In many cases, you will see all the blame being lumped on EACC because everybody knows EACC is the institution that deals with corruption. But this is a huge chain that needs to, work efficiently and together, and so that the results are felt immediately. It helps when people are punished as early as possible after the event. If this thing drags for a long time, then people will basically just give up and say.
The bill that is in Parliament, right, is a bill that has been there for how long now? Almost 2 years.
Yeah, 2025, yeah.
Right?
1 year.
1 year and 2 months. One asks the question, I just want to look at it differently. If the leader of the country would push for finance bill to pass, would push for impeachment of the deputy president, why are we not seeing the same energy being pushed for this bill to be to pass through to make it easier to fight corruption in the country? And what must we do, what must you do for members of parliament to see the need of pushing on with this bill?
Yeah, ours basically is we can't push the parliamentarians because they have their own agenda, they have their own calendar, and it is that is an independent arm of government. But to give credit, I think during this particular time, we had the Conflict of Interest Act, which came into place because of the current government that is in place. We also have the EGP system, which was also introduced, which in our view, as much as many institutions are shying away from onboarding or coming using the system, in our view it is a very good way of dealing with corruption, because if you digitalize the processes of procurement being, of course, the biggest avenue for corruption, you will have reduced corruption in a huge way. So our view is we digitalize all our systems so that we can reduce corruption. But unfortunately, there are some institutions, I'm told about 50 of them who are actually asking for exemption from using the system.
Oh God, okay.
Now we also have the county governments who are saying we can't use the system.
Yeah.
Why? What is so difficult in using the system? In any case, most of the systems from the beginning will always have teething problems, and it is only after using it that we fix the problem.
Okay.
But if you shy away from the beginning and say, well, this system is bad, then there is a problem.
He's the CEO of the EACC for a year now, and it looks like, the next 5 years would be a lot of work for you to do. Abdi Mohamud, thank you for being here with us this morning. Definitely Kenya's eyes are on this commission to see what happens. 10-point agenda, March 7th. It would be interesting to see what the bill of health towards the fight against corruption then is given. Thank you for being in the Situation Room this morning.
You're welcome.
Looking forward to the next conversation. Good morning, folks. It's 8:01.
The latest news from around the world. 94.4 Spice FM. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.